Happy Christmas! I am Melinda Coy, and in the past years I have played Esther Summerson from Bleakhouse at the Great Dickens Christmas Fair.
Hello, I'm Dakota Tittle, and recently I have been playing William Guppy from Bleakhouse.
And I'm Claire Renault, and I have most recently played Ada Clare from Bleakhouse.
We can't be with you this year, but wanted to bring you one of our favorite little scenes from Charles Dickens's 1853 novel Bleakhouse. If you haven't read it, Bleakhouse is a story that revolves around the proceedings of the Court of Chancery, which is in civil court of England, and the resolution of a case, Jarndyce and Jarndyce, involving a will and a great deal of money.
While this may sound boring, the book is decidedly not. It's filled with vivid characters, multiple plot lines, a murder investigation, a chase, spontaneous combustion, and tales of love and loss. Bleakhouse brings so much of Dickens' commentary on class, society, and government to life in an incredibly entertaining way.
Normally we would be acting out this little scene for you in the morning tableau, but as we must be apart, we wanted to bring you this scene in its entirety. Part of the story is told from the viewpoint of Esther Summerson. Bleakhouse is Dickens' only novel told in first person by a female narrator. For this scene, Claire will be reading the narration.
With the morning, there came a letter from Messrs. Kenge and Carboy to Mr. Boythorn, informing him that one of their clerks would wait upon him at noon. As it was the day of the week on which I paid the bills and added up my books and made all the household affairs as compact as possible, I remained at home while Mr. Jarndyce, Ada, and Richard took advantage of a very fine day to go on a little excursion. Mr. Boythorn was to wait for Kenge and Carboy's clerk and then was to go on foot to meet them on their return. Well, I was full of business, examining the tradesmen's books, adding up columns, paying money, filing receipts, and I dare say making a great bustle about it when Mr. Guppy was announced and shown in. I had had some idea that the clerk who was to be sent down might be the young gentleman who had met me at the coach office, but I was glad to see him, as he was associated with my present happiness. I scarcely knew him again. He was so uncommonly smart. He had had an entirely new suit of glossy clothes on, a shining hat, lilac kid gloves, a neckerchief of a variety of colors, a large hothouse flower in his buttonhole, and a thick gold ring on his little finger. Besides which, he quite scented the dining room with bear's grease and other perfumery. He looked at me with an attention that quite confused me when I begged him to take a seat until the servant should return. And as he sat there, crossing and uncrossing his legs in the corner, and I asked him if he had a pleasant ride, and I hoped that Mr. Kenge was doing well, I never looked at him, but I found him looking at me in the same scrutinizing and curious way. When the request was brought to him that he should go upstairs to Mr. Boythorn's room, I mentioned that he would find lunch prepared for him when he came down, of which Mr. Jarndyce hoped he would partake. He said with some embarrassment, holding on the handle of the door,
"Shall I have the honor of finding you here, miss?"
Yes, I should be here.
And he went out with a bow and another look. I thought him only awkward and shy, for he was evidently much embarrassed, and I fancied that the best thing I could do was to wait until I saw that he had everything he wanted and then to leave him to himself. The lunch was soon brought, but it remained for some time on the table. The interview with Mr. Boythorn was a long one, and a stormy one too, I should think, for although his room was at some distance, I heard his loud voice rising every now and then like a high wind, evidently blowing perfect broadsides of denunciation. At last, Mr. Guppy came back, looking something worse for the conference.
"My eye, miss, he's a Tartar."
Pray take some refreshment, sir.
Mr. Guppy sat down at the table and began nervously sharpening the carving knife on the carving fork, still looking at me, as I felt quite sure without looking at him, in the same unusual manner. The sharpening lasted so long that at last I felt a kind of obligation on me to raise my eyes in order that I might break the spell under which he labored, not being able to leave off. He immediately looked at the dish and began to carve.
What will you take yourself, miss? You'll take a morsel of something?
No, thank you.
Shan't I give you a piece of anything at all, miss?
Nothing, thank you. I've only waited to see that you have everything you want. Is there anything I can order for you?
No, I am much obliged to you, miss, I'm sure. I've everything that I can require to make me comfortable. At least, not comfortable. I'm never that.
I thought I'd better go.
I beg your pardon, miss, but would you allow me the favour of a minute's private conversation?
Not knowing what to say, I sat down again.
What follows is without prejudice, miss.
I don't understand what you mean.
It's one of our law terms, miss. You won't make any use of it to my detriment at Kenjan Carboys or elsewhere. If our conversation shouldn't lead to anything, I am to be as I was and am not to be prejudiced in my situation or worldly prospects. In short, it's in total confidence.
I am at a loss, sir, to imagine what you have to communicate in total confidence to me, whom you've never seen but once. But I should be very sorry to do you any injury.
Thank you, miss. I'm sure of it. That's quite sufficient.
All this time, Mr. Guppy was either planing his forehead with his handkerchief or tightly rubbing the palm of his left hand with the palm of his right.
If you would excuse me taking another glass of wine, miss, I think it might assist me in getting on without a continual choke that cannot fail to be mutually unpleasant.
She did so, and came back again. I took the opportunity of moving well behind the table.
You wouldn't allow me to offer you one, would you, miss?
Not any.
Not half a glass? Quarter? No, then to proceed. My present salary, Miss Summerson, at Kenjan Carboys is £2 a week. When I first had the happiness of looking upon you, it was £1.15 and had stood at that figure for a lengthened period. A rise of 5 has since taken place, and a further rise of 5 is guaranteed at the expiration of a term not exceeding 12 months from the present date. My mother has a little property, which takes the form of a small life annuity, upon which she lives in an independent though unassuming manner in the Old Street Road. She is eminently calculated for a mother-in-law. She never interferes, is all for peace, and her disposition easy. She has her failings, as who does not? But I never knew who to do it when company was present, at which time you may freely trust her with wine, spirits, or malt liquors. My own abode is lodgings at Penton Place, Pentonville. It is lowly but airy, open at the back, and considered one of the healthiest outlets. Miss Summerson, in the mildest language, I adore you. Would you be so kind as to allow me, as I may say, to file a declaration? To make an offer.
Mr. Guppy went down on his knees. I was well behind the table and not much frightened.
Get up from that ridiculous position immediately, sir, or I will be obliged to break my implied promise and ring the bell.
Hear me out, miss.
I cannot consent to hear another word, sir, unless you get up from the carpet directly and go sit down at the table as you ought to if you have any sense at all.
He looked at me piteously, but slowly rose and did so with his hand upon his heart and shaking his head at me in a melancholy manner over the tray.
Yet what a mockery it is, miss, to be stationed behind food at such a moment. The soul recoils from food at such a moment, miss.
I beg you to conclude. You have asked me to hear you out, and I beg you to conclude.
I will, miss, as I love and honour. As so likewise I obey. Would that I could make thee the subject of that vow before the shrine.
It is quite impossible and entirely out of the question.
I am aware that in a worldly point of view, according to all appearances, My offer is a poor one. But Miss Summerson, Angel, no, don't ring. I've been brought up in a sharp school and am accustomed to a variety of general practice. Though a young man, I have ferreted out evidence, got up cases, and seen lots of life. Blessed with your hand, what means might I not find of advancing your interests and pushing your fortunes? What might I not get to know nearly concerning you? I know nothing now, certainly, but what might I not if I had your confidence and you set me on?
I told him that he addressed my interest, or what he supposed to be my interest, quite as unsuccessfully as he addressed my inclination, and that he would understand that I requested him, if he pleased, to go away immediately.
Cruel miss, hear but another word. I think you must have seen that I was struck with those charms on the day when I waited at Chancery. I think you must have remarked that I could not forbear tribute to those charms when I put up the steps of the hackney coach. It was a feeble tribute to thee, but it was well meant. Thy image has ever since been fixed in my breast. I have walked up and down of an evening opposite Jellyby's house only to look upon the bricks that once contained thee. This out of today, quite an unnecessary out so far as the attendance, which was its pretended object, was planned by me alone, for thee alone. If I speak of interest, it is only to recommend myself and my respectful wretchedness. Love was before it, and is before it.
I should be pained, Mr. Guppy, to do you or anyone who was sincere in injustice of slighting any honest feeling, however disagreeably expressed. If you have really meant to give me a proof of your good opinion, though ill-timed and misplaced, I feel I ought to thank you. I have very little reason to be proud. I am not proud, I hope. Please go away as if you had never been so exceedingly foolish, and attend to Messrs. Kenge and Carboy's business.
Half a minute, miss. This has been without prejudice?
I will never mention it again, unless you give me future occasion to do so.
A quarter of a minute, miss. In case you should think better at any time, however distant, that's no consequence, but my feelings can never alter. Of anything I have said, particularly what might I not do, Mr. William Guppy, 87 Penton Place, or, if removed, or dead, of blighted hopes, or anything of that sort, care of Mrs. Guppy, 302, Old Street Road, will be sufficient.
He rang the bell. A servant came, and Mr. Guppy, laying his written card upon the table and making a dejected bow, departed. Raising my eyes as he went out, I saw once more him looking at me after he had passed the door. I sat there for another hour or more, finishing my books and payments and getting through plenty of business. Then I arranged my desk and put everything away, and was so composed and cheerful that I thought I had quite dismissed the entire unexpected incident. But when I went upstairs to my own room, I surprised myself by beginning to laugh about it, and then surprised myself even more by beginning to cry about it. In short, I was in a flutter for a little while, and felt as if an old chord had been more coarsely struck than it had ever been since the days of my dear old doll, long buried in the garden.
We hope you enjoyed this little reading. We miss you all and can't wait to share another year of fun.
But until then, be safe, healthy, wash your hands, and please wear your mask.
And from us to you, have a very happy Christmas.